Are you guys wondering whether to buy or rent? It is the age-old debate. A lot of us young people are pulling our hair out. And of course, this is the Young Money Hackers podcast. You're here with Charlie and HD. Let's take it away. So today's topic is about buy versus rent. What's the right answer? How do we approach this in the first place?
It's a very heated debate that's an ongoing thing, and I feel like the comparison goes deeper than comparing a rent price to a mortgage payment. You know, we hear sound bites all the time like rent money is dead money, and you know, I don't want to get rich paying off someone else. I don't want to make someone else rich paying off their mortgage, things like that. But there's so much more to the puzzle, and we're going to go over that in this episode.
Yeah, right. So you looked at, so obviously a lot of people are looking at I guess the starters is like, oh, well, it's cheaper to go mortgage or cheaper to go rent. I mean, that's a pretty skewed metric because you don't often find properties that are cheaper to pay, you know, necessarily with mortgage than to rent, because obviously there are some properties that are going to be attracting higher rent than the repayment to the bank, and there are going to be some properties where it's going to be the other way around. So I think it is it's a very important question to ask. Obviously the answer is pay the mortgage, right? Always buy, right? That's the answer. But before we get there, let's actually unpack some of the scenarios. One thing that actually came to my mind is, like, why are you renting? Why are you renting? Is it because, like, you know, you're young and you just want to have a go at living out on your own and have that lifestyle? Well, I mean, don't let me stop you.
So for me, the reason I rent is because it frees up more flexibility and options that have allowed me to invest early on. So I'm capitalizing on the property that I live in, whilst also having those options to buy, you know, investments like property, and then rent those out and get the benefit of the cash flow without having to sacrifice all that equity and liquidity on buying an asset that may not perform well. That's right. Usually won't perform well.
So I think what people call that is rentvesting. That's where you're renting for the purpose of being able to invest in other locations, and you're letting the cash flow of that service your lifestyle, which I don't have a problem. I have a problem with people out there just renting. It's like some rebellious cycle that they're in against their parents or whatever, right? And just going, nah, I don't want to live at home. This is where I want to be. Like, I get all of that, but are you setting in measures where that is going to be sustainable? That you're not just going to pay after tax money that you're earning for a house for you to live in? Whereas, you know, if you were to then purchase a property elsewhere that is positively geared, and you let that cash flow then service your lifestyle, then I find that a lot more sustainable.
I 100% agree with that sentence. It's like the whole purpose of renting being a better decision financially has to be because you're investing as well. Because yes, if you are just renting and you're spending the rest of your surplus income on your lifestyle, well, then you're not growing anything. So the catch is that you have to be investing. That is where renting provides a good opportunity, especially in, you know, being able to live a leaner lifestyle that you don't have to outlay all those costs of home ownership. It gives you those options. Yeah, for example, like there's a lot, like when you buy a home, I feel like a lot of people will buy a house blindly. They'll just rush into it, not considering those costs such as the down payment, you know, the stamp duty. Like saving 20% on a $500,000 property, that's $100,000, you know. And I know there's first home buyer schemes and everything like that that can help. But then they also limit your ability to buy specific properties as well. So, I mean, I feel like a good option, a good middle ground for people would be to buy their first property with wealth in mind, so they actually have something that they can leverage moving forward, rather than over leveraging on their dream home early on and getting trapped.
I think you raise a very cool point of the idea of a dream home. I think what people fail to realize is that the place that they live in and the place that they own don't have to be the same properties. Like that's a big myth. Everyone's just like, oh, I want to live in this house, but it's too expensive. So they often make themselves a compromise by buying a crappy home and a crappy investment at the same time for those that do decide to buy. So because of your limited budget, and a lot of young people have limited budgets, right? It goes without saying. You are buying something that's further away from the CBD because it's too expensive to buy closer to the CBD, right? And then also because it's not completely out there and earning income with high yield rates, on suburbs that are slightly low socioeconomic, where you wouldn't necessarily associate yourself to live in. It's also a pretty crappy investment at the same time. So and then you end up buying something that you like. So you buy something that's nice and new, one of those fresh developments where a lot of what you're buying is a depreciable asset, where it's mostly building and less of the land. So exactly. I think that's where the question is, like, really the question of do I buy or rent is the wrong question. That's why we're here, to invalidate these very basic questions, because if that's all you're thinking, and rather, and the focus rather should be on where are you heading with your investment and your property journey. So it doesn't have to be the same property. You can rent in a place where you feel like you can live in, and it doesn't have to be crazy big property. It can just be like a normal, or something that could accommodate you and your lifestyle. Simply, a lot of you are going to be single, and you're not going to be bound to children and stuff like that. So based on that, that's a really great place to find yourself in, and you have that flexibility, and you don't have to over leverage on your rental outlays, and then you've got income that's going to be generated from a property that you bought elsewhere where there is a crazy good cash flow and investment potential.
Exactly. It gives you the option to enjoy where you live whilst capitalizing on a really good asset that will service your lifestyle down the track. Not service your lifestyle straight away. You can get into a good property that might, that you can spend all that money on, but without having to, it doesn't have to be your dream. It's not the end goal. It's an entry point, and it's a good entry point that will service your lifestyle later on. I think that is the main thing that a lot of people miss and end up getting trapped by is, like you said, ending up with a property that isn't necessarily where they would want to live, but because they thought it was a good idea to get into the market, because of, societal conditioning or whatever, they're now living somewhere where they wouldn't otherwise want to live. And also it's not a very good asset in terms of a financial return.
And so when, I also tend to find that when people buy, they have to buy something with like 5 to 8 years ahead in time. So even if you might be a single bloke, you might have to buy a 3-bedroom house, right? But that doesn't mean you have to rent a 3-bedroom house. If you're a single bloke, you just have to plan for a year ahead. So don't go for like $800 a week, $700 a week, like crazy 3-bedroom house when you're renting by yourself and you're investing it in another place. You can actually buy an investment that's a bit further away that's collecting good rent, and you can just buy like a 1-bedroom studio, rent a 1-bedroom studio. So you're living a lifestyle that services your needs right now, and then see if you get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, a husband or wife, a cat and a dog and kids, like down the track. So your rental your rental outlay shouldn't be as big. Now, I have seen some really smart cookies out there, young blokes and lasses, who are getting a really big rental on purpose in a really good location. So they're like outlaying $800 to $1,000 a week in rent, and from there, what they're doing is they're actually renting out the rooms on a higher cost. So they end up paying no rent. And I have so much respect for people who is able to do that. I mean, that's how I got started, and it's such a good feeling, because you either don't pay anything for your living expenses or you get paid to live. Sometimes the net income of all of these rooms getting rented out is more, and that's called like a share housing sort of model. Obviously, always be communicating with your landlords for these kind of things along the way, but there are appropriate properties out there, and these aren't the flashiest properties. And you know what? Some of the young people out there are so bloody precious, and they say they don't want to live this way. Look, that's fine. That's no problem. I think also in the United States, there's a another similar process like this, is where they buy a multiplex and you live in one, and then you rent out the others, and then you let that pay all of your mortgage and then some more, which I think is a pretty good strategy. But then that also requires quite a big chunk of investment. In Australia, we'll call that block of units. But who in their 20s has the money to buy literally like 6 blocks of units? It's pretty hard.
The house hacking method, right? It's one of the best strategies, I think, for people to get started. And I think if like you said, people sometimes complain about that, but that comes back down to a lifestyle choice. How much do you value building wealth? If you really do from a young age, then house hacking, in my opinion, is one of the best options for people. I've said previously myself, like if I could go back in time, that's probably what I would do. You know, I like, because I've always lived in like, you know, apartments, things like that. I did live in a share house at one point and that was great. But now it's like, yeah, going back, house hacking, man, rent out the rooms, cover the cost of living, and you could, and it's a good way to get started in property.
Exactly. And it's like not such a terrible skill that you learn how to live with people you don't get along. Like it's actually a good skill to have. And who says you don't have to get along? You can actually get along and find some really lifelong friendships there as well. So, but you just have to be the one that leads the pack. That's the thing. So you got to get the lease, you got to get all the control over it, and you got to actually scout all the people to come move in, and then you got to put yourself in a positive cash flow situation. So that's another scenario where I would say, you know, renting is it can be beneficial. You know, there's also like a lot of people out there doing AirBnb strategies with rental properties as well, obviously in communication with the landlord and the property managers, where they basically make an arbitrage profit on the short-term rental income being greater than the long-term rental, which is like on a yearly or a 2-yearly contract, you know, rental contract. So I think they make a pretty good killing out there. I have actually had some of these properties under my belt as well. And guys, it works. If you do your math up front, then it can definitely work. And more on this strategy a bit later on. But let's actually go back to the question. So, you know what? If we've established why we should rent, let's establish why we should buy. You know, we're saying to our listeners right now, hey, you can get the cash flow from something you buy to service the rent and the lifestyle that you have. Well, they're probably wondering, well, how much is owning a house going to make me every year? Well, I think this is a much better question to ask than say, what property am I going to buy? The question you always have to ask is, how much is owning a property going to make me? Right? And if you can't genuinely answer that question, why the hell are you buying?
That's pretty much what it comes down to. How much, like, because remember, we have wealth in mind. That's what we're prioritizing here. Whereas a lot of people will prioritize lifestyle. Well, I don't want to live that way. I don't want to do that. And it's like, if you can maybe delay that in your lifestyle, not go for the dream home straight up, but then, you know, 10 years down the track, this investing and having wealth in mind in the beginning will provide you with those options down the line. And that's ultimately what will give you the better lifestyle. So it's a little bit of sacrifice.
I mean, exactly. I think it's really worth noting. This just clicked on me right now. Lifestyle will follow wealth, but wealth will not follow lifestyle. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And yet here we are seeking lifestyle first, which is a great way to lose both, right?
That's a great saying.
And if we can follow wealth first, then lifestyle will follow, and we'll have both. And yet here we are focusing on lifestyle first, which just blows my mind. I think you know, I mean, I think you choose to be wealthy in Australia. Australia marketplace is so fair, especially in property. You can choose to be wealthy in this marketplace that we're in right now, and that's a very privileged marketplace. Not everywhere in the world where you can just simply choose to be wealthy. And that's probably a controversial statement, but there's ways around it. So if we look at properties to buy, let's actually get some numbers behind it. I mean, we're looking at some data just before this podcast, weren't we? And we're looking at returns from different cities. So we're looking at, these are sort of average yields, sort of median rental yields across suburbs in Brisbane. Okay, we're looking at Brisbane right now, and we're looking at the average of 4 to about 5%. You know, high 3s, mid 4s, late 4s is what we're looking at. So like sort of like the early 4s is what we're looking at in terms of rental yield. I think it's also worth noting that from the time of today's recording, the interest rate offered by home loans for ANZ, not a sponsored post, by the way. You should always seek out a broker instead of going directly to the bank, because it's the better way to borrow money. And that's a universal truth. No one can really debate me on that. And that is right now, you know, ANZ is offering 5.5%. So that means if you're on interest-only repayments, getting a 4.2% yield on your properties is going to put you backwards. So if you buy a property like this, it's going to put you backwards. But then But then we did do a study, and we're looking at the top yield returns across different states, across the nation. And the regions where they have experienced high capital growth, like Melbourne, have overall very low rental yield. Whereas whereas locations where there's lower increase in capital gains, they have a higher rental yield. But then that's just a historical fact. But the thing is, it doesn't necessarily mean higher rental yields locations don't necessarily go up in price either, because usually they're lower socioeconomic areas, and where there's weakness, there's opportunity, so the capital growth can actually be quite significant there as well. And arguably, once the capital growth goes in there, then the rental yields may fall down the track because the property prices are, in comparison to rent, have gone much higher, which is what Melbourne is right now. So overall, I think even if you are having an investment property where it's like net negative, like they're called negatively geared properties, the capital growth is still going to be better off to actually put you in a place further ahead. In our previous episode, we looked at how much property is going up in our past 30 years. But overall, looking at this data, overall, observing this data, I would prefer to buy a property that puts more money in my pocket after I pay all my expenses than the properties that don't. So I think in that sense, there's a lot of incentive to actually buy, and you can actually do the calculation up front on how much money you're actually going to make before making the purchase.
So what you're saying is that you can start off negatively geared and then hope for the growth in return, or you're saying you want to start off with the money going into your pocket and also expect that capital growth?
Well, I think our listeners can answer straight away is that if buying a property puts more money in your pocket, wouldn't that be the best way to service your lifestyle?
Yes.
So then why wouldn't you go through the effort of looking for properties, not just in your backyard, but all over Australia, to identify opportunities where simply putting the money in is going to cough up money back every year on a covenant?
We just, before this podcast, we had to look through a few properties which literally were doing that. And it's crazy to see that there is opportunity right here.
Exactly right. So we were looking at the I think Armadale, wasn't it, in WA, right? We saw that the rental yield was sitting at 6.8%. And we were able to find a property for 800 square meters selling for $299, not even $313 as a median sale price. So what we want to do is we want to beat them on the sale price. We want to buy them lower than the median, right? Obviously, and then try to get a rental higher than the median so that our rental yield is higher than the median. So these are median rental yields. Of course, we can beat median. We can be better than average. Come on, guys. That's why we're here. So literally during 5 minutes of research, you and I were able to stumble upon a property with a fantastic development potential down the track as well, which is just if you have these reasons why you would purchase a property, then why wouldn't you buy a property? No, don't buy a property just because you like it. Buy a property because you know why you're getting into it. And there's money that's coming into the thing. I think this one was passively generating about $10,000 a year in income easily. And that's just on yield. That's just on cash flow alone. Yeah, on yield. So I think
on the way
that was help. Exactly right. So if you're paying like a $400 a week in rent in an apartment near the city, wherever you live in, that's $20,000 a year in rent that you have to pay. Would you rather that $20,000 come from your own paycheck after you pay all tax, or would you let 10,000 of that get shaved back by a property that you own that doesn't cost you anything? It puts more money in your pocket.
I would rather the one that's putting the money in my pocket.
Exactly right. And the beautiful thing about that is that it then sets you up with more money in your pocket. Because if you save 10 grand, that's still saving 10 grand because you're still going to live in a place that you're going to pay 20 grand a year for. Then, it's crazy, isn't it, that I put it this way? People think $400 a week isn't much for rent, but then if you stretch it out across the year, it's 20 grand, isn't it? It's strictly 20 grand a year. These guys are paying 20 grand a year to live. And if you're shaving back 10 grand of that, you're basically saving a down payment for your subsequent house a lot quicker as well.
Yeah.
Which then allows you to go for the second house, third house, fourth house, which is what we truly wish for our listeners.
Exactly. And that's how we get the snowball rolling. That's how we get this whole thing started, right? So compare that to your normal strategy, your everyday mum and dad strategy of just get into the market blindly, hopefully this does well because it's property. Whereas we look at the data and we consider the opportunities that we have, and it's quite staggering. Like, it can make a massive difference to your journey, and it can give you guys like an actual picture of when you will be able to retire early. Like, this is how people build their passive income streams, right? And retire early. It's the ultimate outcome.
It really is. And the more you do it, the faster the subsequent acquisition becomes. So the snowball is just going to go on and on. Because like after you buy your first property, you'll have like anywhere between 8 and 10 grand come through the door every year. The second property is going to then bring about the same. That means after you own the second property, you got like anywhere between 16 and 20k coming through the door every year, and your third property, and so on. So then, what's that extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 of income going to do for you? And what would it mean for you to achieve this? And is that going to get you to your desired lifestyle, your dream property, right? With a pool, 4 bedrooms, something with a dog running around, that classic Australian dream. Is that going to be more achievable doing this way? Or is it going to be more achievable you just working hard, saving as much money as you can? Because to be honest, I really don't see the numbers stacking up in the latter method. But in the former method, you can get there faster than anyone else ever will.
Exactly. So the buy versus rent question really comes down to what you want. Like, if you want to prioritize wealth, then you could find an opportunity that is better to rent and invest, or better to buy on the way in and house hack, like we spoke about. So yeah, it just depends on really what you really value, what you really want.
But the choice that we're giving is it's not really a choice it's not really a choice in the first place. Because like one, we're basically saying uphold your lifestyle where you lose both wealth and lifestyle. And the other one is uphold wealth and get both. It's not really a choice. I don't think it really is. I mean, everybody knows how to choose that, but how you're actually going to get there, whether you're going to bother to get there is the 1% rule. Seriously, out of 100 people that listen to this, one person will take action. Literally.
Yeah.
And everyone else will just listen and let it pass through the year. What kind of person are you going to be? That's it. Are you forever going to be a dreamer, or are you going to actually become wealthy? It was a 50 Cent that said, get rich or die trying,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Everyone wants it, right, but not everyone is willing to do it.
And you know what? It's not even that hard. I don't think it's that hard. The effort that you put into making this work is a simple matter of decision and a direction that you're going to take. It's not really like a grind. I'll tell you what is a grind. Waking up 9 to 5, doing work at 9 to 5, every year, day in, day out. That's a grind. Making a decision and making an informed decision from today so that would set a course for the rest of your life. That really isn't the grind. You know what I mean? And it's just a shift in the mindset and the clicking of your brains. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, that's basically it. If you guys want to learn more about properties here in Australia, if you're a young person struggling and you'd like to get more information, go check out all the links in the description below. We've got courses, we've got lots of great resources available, both free and paid. Go and check it out. If you'd like us to help you guys out acquiring property anywhere in Australia with the same methods that we have applied in our own lives to be in a situation that we're in right now, which, both Charlie and I would agree that it's a pretty good place to be in, then please join this club of young money hackers. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Hit us up on our socials. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. See ya.